Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So folks, for this episode today, and I would also say for a couple of other episodes, obviously since the Lions are not practicing today because they have their preseason game tomorrow, there's going to be a little bit more of a flexibility as far as being able to talk about topics that normally we don't get a chance to talk about, but they're important all the same. Now, what exactly are we going to talk about in this episode today? What we're going to be talking about specifically is how, for the Detroit Lions, their offense right now is getting a lot of attention, but it's getting a lot of attention in a lot of ways that a lot of people are probably not wanting it to get. And what I mean by that specifically is it's getting negative attention. It's getting attention because, particularly after yesterday's practice, a lot of reports started coming out because of the fact that, that there was a question that was asked by, a reporter to Dan Campbell, where specifically the reporter highlighted the fact that, defense appears ahead of the offense. Defense is winning more in practice instead of the offense. And Dan Campbell acknowledged that that was indeed the case. But again, Dan Campbell made sure to explain why he wasn't concerned about it. However, though, after the practice, more reports started coming out about how, it seemed like that there was a problem as far as, the adaptation, as far as players starting to, really get into a sync, really getting to gel as far as with John Morton's new version of the offense that the Lions are running. And it seems like now a lot of Lions fans are starting to really, have a concern about the Lions offense because, now all these people are talking about how, the offense is not clicking at a full 100% capacity. It's not actually doing what, they're expecting it to do. And everybody's now starting to have this bit of a worrywart kind of mindset because of the offense. And they're like, it's great that the defense is doing so well, but the offense is having a problem. The offense is not running at full efficiency. And I remember I was sitting there and I was thinking about all this, and I'm like, you know what? It's kind of funny that everybody's talking about that, but nobody's actually kind of looking at the pink elephant that's in the room here. Nobody's nobody's addressing the big glaring omission here as to why, the offense is not, doing what we're used to seeing at this point because it's having a couple of misfires. It's not exactly doing 100% of everything correctly. But you know what the problem is that there are people out there that are not talking about this very glaring omission. They're not talking about this specific thing that if you actually do a little bit of thinking, you actually do a little bit of logical reasoning, there's not really a reason why you should be worried about what's going on with the Detroit Lions offense in camp. And I'll tell you why. As we all know, the old adage in the NFL is offense wins games, defense wins championships. Now, for most people, when they hear that adage, they think of it very specifically and very simply of, your offense is going to score points, your offense is going to win your regular season games, but when it comes to those big-time games, it comes to those playoff games, it comes to the championship game, that's when the defense is going to win you the game. That's when the defense is going to step up and make the difference over the offense. And as we know in the NFL, over the years, this adage has proven time and time again to be correct. Some perfect examples of this that I can think of, very recently or somewhat a little bit more recently, but in this past still, are teams like the 85 Bears, the 2000 Ravens, the 2013 Seahawks. These are teams that the defense they had absolutely smothered opponents with violent and absolutely suffocating defenses. Despite either the fact that their own offense was not the greatest, or they were facing against a top offense. But the point of the matter is that the defense, regardless of the fact of their own offense not being able to play up to their level, or the fact that they're playing against a really, really top offense in and of itself while they're playing that, Super Bowl game, they were still able to just shut down anybody that virtually opposed them along the way, whether it was in the Super Bowl or prior to the Super Bowl. But the reason why we're talking about this in relation to the Detroit Lions offense is because what most people are not talking about, what most people are not connecting the dots together on, is that just because the Lions offense right now in practice is not running at 100% efficiency, not running at peak efficiency, whatever term you'd like to use, that does not mean that there's actually a problem. It does not mean that there's actually something wrong going on here. In fact, what I think is about to happen is what I would like to call an extremely rare occurrence that happens very, very frankly, so rarely, you might as well call it a phenomenon. And what I'm specifically referring to is when a team's defense is, as good as it is, it will make their, obviously their defense is so good that it will make the opposing offense that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis in practice that much better, to a point of where the offense themselves is nearly unstoppable. And I believe that the 2025 Detroit Lions will be one of those such rare occurrences. Let me explain why I think that. Obviously, as I said, Dan Campbell was asked the question about, the defense seeming to be ahead of the offense, the defense seeming to win more in practice ahead of the offense, but it was very specific about how Campbell addressed that question. It was very specific about, how he wanted to answer the question without, saying, oh yeah, things are just not going well at all. And the reason why I say that is because, again, I've talked about the Bears and how they're doing with their offense, since we're talking about offensive differences between Ben Johnson and John Morton and how the offenses are, getting up to speed or not getting up to speed in certain instances. When you take a look at what's going on with the Bears, they're having so many problems that it's not just small little details. It's big details. You have inefficiency, you have ineffectiveness with the offense in general, just getting set, getting to the line, getting out of the huddle. You're having inefficiency, inaccuracy in terms of the quarterback being able to put the ball exactly where it needs to be, reading defenses, getting time in the pocket. You're hearing all of that stuff coming out of camp. But the problem is with that is that those are massive, glaring issues. False starts, teams not getting set, quarterback not being able to read the defense, quarterback being just inaccurate in general. Those are things that are massive problems that those will cost you games in a number of ways many times over. That's not at all what Campbell said what was going on. What Campbell specifically highlighted is that there are very small things that are popping up in practice where the offense is falling a little bit behind of the defense, and that's why the defense is winning. Hey, you know what? A guy might not be in the right position. You know what? His footwork might be wrong. Hey, you know what? We have a drop pass or a tip pass from a player not fully securing the ball, and the defense will get the interception. Things like that. We're not hearing the same things coming out of camp for the Lions that we're hearing like coming out of the Bears camp. In fact, it is a completely different night and day kind of occurrence. The only thing that is similar is that the offenses are not running at peak efficiency that what the fans are expecting. And here's the problem that I have with that, is that when you actually sit back and you actually digest the information for what it truly is, it actually lets you know that, hey, the Lions offense is in a lot better position than what the reporters, than what the fans are really actually thinking here. Because while Campbell did acknowledge that the defense is actually in front of the offense at the moment, Campbell did not state that the offense is just absolutely getting dominated by the defense. He wasn't stating that the defense was miles ahead of the offense and that the offense is getting obliterated in practice. Rather, per Campbell's own words, he stated that the Lions offense, it's not disorganized or it's not having difficulty necessarily changing from Johnson to Morton, but like I said, it's those small little details that still need ironing out. Pretty much what that ought to tell you is go back to when we were in the early part of 2022, late part of 2021, and the people were still asking, hey, how much longer is it going to take before you guys really start actually figuring out ways to win games? How much further do you guys really need to get until you guys are actually there to fully compete? And what did Campbell say? He kept saying the exact same thing that he literally said yesterday in relation to the offense. He's like, we're right there. It's just a couple of little details that we have to clean up. It's just a couple little things that we have to get right, have to iron out. And when you think about it, that right there already ought to be a source of encouragement when it comes to Lions fans, because he's literally stating that the Lions offense is right there. Literally right there. And it's almost ready to make it a 1v1 kind of day-to-day, occurrence with the defense in practice. And that right there is a huge source of encouragement, because to me, it's like, okay, let's understand something here. This is an offense that has got a whole lot of things that are new to it. Yes, you have a new play caller in John Morton. Yes, John Morton was there in 2022, but he's implementing his own new way of doing things. He's implementing his own new play calling routine, different ways to call schemes, different ways to call plays. And then on top of that, you've also got, all these new players that are in there. You've got Christian Mahogany, who's now, becoming the starting left guard. You've got Tate Ratledge, who's becoming the starting right guard. You've moved Glasgow from left guard, and you've now plugged him in at starting center. And while, Glasgow has been a starting center before, you're doing it with a completely different set of offensive linemen than what he did at the last time. He didn't have Penei Sewell at right tackle last time. He didn't have Tate Ratledge at right guard. He didn't have Christian Mahogany at left guard. So chemistry has to be built. Understanding within those five linemen have to be built. And then on top of that, you've also got guys that while they're veterans, again, they're still trying to figure out how, John Morton wants things done. They're understanding things, the intricacies of his different little schemes. They're getting themselves right back into practice mode, and they're getting themselves back into game mode. Everybody wants to think that, hey, you know what? The Lions should have picked right where they left off exactly when they were done last year. Let's understand something here first and foremost. Other than the obvious fact of how you're dealing with a different offensive coordinator, these guys have not done team organized drills prior to where they are right now for at least 3 to 4 to 5 months. And when you're talking about an offense that is as complex as the Lions is, and it's all based upon timing, it's all based upon execution going off like literal clockwork, that takes time to fine-tune. And for me, it's like, okay, I understand what people are trying to get at here with, oh, you know what, we weren't expecting this because we thought the Lions offense was just going to pick right back where it was and just, go off to the races. But you have to think about it. The fact that the offense is, having the small difficulties that it's having, not the big ones, the small ones that it's having, that is a huge source of encouragement, but it's also a huge indicator that this offense is about to absolutely start dominating people, especially when it starts getting into those, regular season games, especially when we get to the joint practices. Because like I said, you've got 3 new offensive linemen that are trying to work together, build chemistry in the middle. Plus, on top of that, Taylor Decker was out for like the first week or 2 of practice. They're still trying to work him in. They're still trying to get him back up to actually, taking the full-time reps with the team. So that means, okay, you know what? While he's doing individual drills and he's getting himself back into, that football mode, he's not actually out there when it comes time to do the full team drills. Which means, who's your starting left tackle? Well, it's not Dan Skipper because he's dealing with an ankle injury. oh, that means you've got Giovanni Manu. And the problem is that according to reports, he's really struggling in practice. And let's consider this here. There's a reason why the blindside left tackle is considered typically one of the most important positions on the team, because most quarterbacks are right-handed. That quarterback needs to be able to feel comfortable knowing that his blindside is totally taken care of. Well, let's think about it here. When you've got Marcus Davenport, who's a damn good edge rusher in his own right, or you've got Aiden Hutchinson, who's probably the best edge rusher in camp and in the NFL, absolutely going to town on this guy every single time there's a practice rep, that's going to disrupt the efficiency of the offense, because now Goff is going to feel like, okay, here, I've got to be watching what's coming in my back door here, because I don't have Taylor Decker guarding my blind side. I've got a guy by the name of Manu who, while he is a physically embodying person, he still's not there as far as being able to fully assume the role as a backup. And that report has been coming out now for absolutely a long time about how, while he's a physically imposing person, he's not there yet. So you have to put that into perspective. You have to understand, okay, that's going to affect things. But at the same time, you've also got all the things that I just talked about a moment before. All of these players are getting settled into the offense itself, learning what their role is, how it affects them within John Morton's scheme. Plus, on top of that, they're getting themselves back into football routine here. And when you're trying to do all that in one singular motion, the fact that there has been so few problems as far as what Campbell has highlighted, not these big, massive problems like what the Bears are dealing with as far as, we can't get set, there's false starts, we're having guys that don't know their assignments at all. Maybe not just because, they're off by a couple of feet here or there, they don't understand this, that, or the other thing, or they're just not 100% there, like they're just completely lost. That is a completely different kettle of fish. So for me, it's like, okay, let's understand something here. This offense, if I had to give it a guess, is probably operating at about 75 to 85% efficiency right now, somewhere within that ballpark, where the defense is probably operating closer at 90 to 95%. But let's just think about this for half a damn second. Even though the offense is running at only 75 to 85% efficiency right now, even at that level, against a defense that's almost running at peak efficiency, it's not like, as Campbell said, that the offense is getting obliterated in practice. It's not like Campbell said that, the defense is just winning every single rep, they're winning every single practice, they're winning every single period. The offense is still winning on certain plays. The offense is still getting theirs in. It's just not as consistent, it's just not as often as what we've seen in the past. So imagine that. If at 75 to 85% efficiency right now, while you've got all these new things that are going on, or you have Taylor Decker not in the lineup fully yet, they're still getting wins. They're still able to put up at least a decent fight against this defense. Imagine, if you will, what will happen once this offense gets to running closer to 90-95% efficiency, and especially once it gets to 100% capacity of efficiency. What I'm trying to get at here is, because of how damn good the defense is playing, and the fact that the offense is still able to put up a good fight against them, even though they're not winning as consistently as they have in the past, that is good news. The reason why is because with the defense constantly challenging the offense, all it does is, as the saying goes, iron sharpens iron, a man sharpens another man. All of these offensive guys that are getting challenged by this defense, whether it's, in terms of coverage, whether it's in terms of pressure up front, whether it's in terms of whatever the case might be, all they're doing is getting better, even when they're not fully operating at 100% efficiency yet. And think about this, while the offense itself is not operating at 100% efficiency as an entire unit, that does not mean that certain players are not still winning. That does not mean that certain players are still not having a lot of good practice reps or a lot of good practices. And it doesn't mean that, those players are not able to continue to grow. Guys like Goff, guys like Gibbs, guys like St. Brown, Jamo, Laporta, Tesla, all of these guys are still getting good reps in. All of these guys are still able to show that, hey, you know what? Even though things are not 100% where we'd like them to be just yet, we're still able to get wins here. We're still able to show that we can hold our own. It's not just a downright domination of, a freaking full-grown adult versus a freaking infant. And that's also not to mention guys like Khalif Raymond, who's really had himself a damn good camp so far. And again, it highlights that while the Lions offense is currently learning a little bit, it's adapting, it's still operating at an extremely high level compared to most other offenses, especially, as I said, the Chicago Bears offense, which is absolutely misfiring all over the damn place. And you have to think about this. The real thing about that I find funny is that the Lions, so far from what we're hearing in practice, they're not running trick plays to try and get their offense going. They're not having to run misdirections. They're not trying to get cute and fanciful with their offense just so that way their offense even has a semblance of a chance. That's what the Bears are having to do. The Bears are trying to run trick plays already. They're trying to implement all these crazy, wild things just so that way their offense has a chance to operate in practice. The Lions' offense does not have to do that. They're still able to break off huge plays for chunks of yards, get touchdowns, the whole 9 yards. So far, the only player on defense that is actually fully just dominating, which again, I think a lot of people owe an apology not only to certain individuals who tried to dispel the rumor, but also to Aiden Hutchinson himself that, Hutchinson's not going to be the same type of player. Up against Sewell in practice and all over the front of the defensive line going against the offensive line, he's just absolutely obliterating people. That's about the only guy that's just absolutely dominating all over the place. Hence the reason why Campbell has had to implement what is now known in practice as the Hutch rule. When you quite literally have to have a rule that's named after you, you know you're doing something extremely well. But the final thing that I want to talk about here, and I want to keep in mind when we're having this conversation about the offense in relation to the defense and how well it's performing, is that these unit battles, in and of themselves, while they get a huge amount of attention, what really needs to be paid attention to is the individual matchups. Because, again, like I said, notice how with Goff, he's making accurate throws. He's putting the ball exactly where it needs to be. Nobody's talking about how he's missing reads. Nobody's talking about how he's holding on to the ball too long or how his passes are inaccurate. Most of the time, whenever we hear something bad about the passing game, 9 times out of 10, it's typically one of two things that's happened. Either one, something in the protection broke down, which typically has to do with the fact that Aiden Hutchinson absolutely is destroying who he's going up against, which again, part of the reason why the Hutch rule is in place. Or, as we saw a lot yesterday, which has not been typical of the Lions virtually ever since, Campbell has been there, but especially over the point of this entire training camp period, is there were a lot of drop passes. Which tells me this, okay, the receivers, they probably just had a bad day. They probably just, hey, you know what? We weren't totally locked in. We're going to have to focus on going to the jugs machine after practice, re-hone ourselves, refocus in, get ready to go when it's time to practice again. But again, you have to understand something. Even though that you still have those problems that are going on, those very, very small, very minute problems, you still see these highlights that are coming out of practice. A lot of highlights that show how Amon-Ra St. Brown is still making precise catches with insane body control and hand-eye coordination. You still see all of these explosive plays, whether they're for long bombs or whether they're for short routes, with Jamison Williams, who, again, is looking like he's ready to have himself an absolutely just breakout year. And this is going up against some of the best competition that the Lions have in camp, whether it's Arnold, whether it's Reed, whether it's Branch, whether it's Joseph. And again, to say that he's doing that against some of the best competition in camp means he's doing it against some of the best competition in the NFL. And again, let's not also forget about the fact that how Isaac Tesla has been making immense strides. He's been starting to get reps with the starting offense, which means that the offensive playmakers, the head coach, everybody else, they now have a big amount of trust in him to start actually putting him out there. And again, you still also have Raymond, who's also showing that he's just as good as a receiving threat as he is a punt return man. all of these components going up and, doing this against some of the best defensive talent in the NFL, they're still winning, and they're still showing that while the Lions offense as a whole is still trying to figure a couple of things out, a few small things out, it's still an absolute force to be reckoned with. Because, again, this is our own defense in practice. We have not yet seen how our offense is going to run against other defenses. So it's not exactly a fair barometer to say, okay, here, what exactly is our offense going to do when you don't have scripted plays in practice and the defense knows, okay, this is what the offense is going to try to do? When it's like, hey, you know what? We have no idea what the offense is going to try to do. It's about as close to a game situation as we can possibly make it. You guys have to fully read and understand and comprehend your roles and try and figure out what the offense is trying to do to you. That's another thing that a lot of people are not understanding. In practice, you have scripts. You have plays that are put into place. You have, okay, you know what? We're going to try and put the offense in a really disadvantageous position here, going up against a defense that's really going to have the effect to just absolutely, put them in a bad spot. So again, there's a lot of factors and components here that are not being factored in when we're having this conversation about the offense. But the fact that the offense is still being able to win at least a decent amount against this very, very formidable defense in practice, even while it's not operating at 100%, again, I'm trying to tell you all this. When that offense gets closer to 90, 95%, almost 100%, they're going to absolutely dominate opponents' defenses because of the fact that they've been having to deal with all that against our defense in practice. And you have to think about it. If our defense is as good as what we're hearing, which in my opinion, I think it's top 5, top 3, could be even the best defense in the NFL, especially if we bring back Zadarius Smith. Imagine how that offense is going to operate against other units with the amount of firepower and weaponry that we have at our full disposal. That's why I'm saying Campbell's answer about the offense, it's very telling. Because if you've actually played football, you realize how much good comes from going up against your own players. And while the Lions have some of the best players in the NFL on both sides of the ball, an argument can be made that because, and I just made the argument, that since the Lions defense is that damn good in practice, even with the Lions offense having its potentially small issues and still getting its wins here or there, the Lions offense is just fine. It's just working out things. And again, we still have a month before we actually get to the regular season. We still have all of these joint training camp practices. We still have 3 preseason games. We have a lot of time for all this stuff to get figured out. And I have no doubt in my mind that it will get figured out. And as the weeks continue to go by, I'm pretty confident that this report is going to become a quick thing of the past. So again, that's why I'm saying nobody's talking about this. Everybody's already starting to get into a little bit of a panic mode, and it's like, relax, cool your engines, pump the brakes. We're not even close to where you guys think we're at. That's just my wholehearted opinion here. But I've said what I wanted to say about this, so I'm going to end this episode and say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like the content, I highly encourage you all to subscribe if you've not done so in the past. But if you just subscribed or you've subscribed in the past and you've not yet done so, I also want to highly encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you guys never miss any more content that I push out. I hope everybody out there has something in life that makes them happy, makes them smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.